The air hung heavy and damp, thick with the scent of pine and wet earth. I'd always loved hiking, especially in the autumn when the leaves turned and the air grew crisp. This time, I decided to explore Cherokee Forest, a place known more for its sprawling size than any particular beauty. I'd read online that some trails were poorly marked, but I scoffed at the warnings. I had my GPS, water, snacks, and plenty of daylight left. What could go wrong? Famous last words, right? About 2 hours in, the trail vanished. 1 minute, I was on a clear path. The next, just trees. Tall, whispering pines surrounded me, their needles muffling every sound. I checked my GPS, but the signal was weak, flickering in and out. Annoyed, I decided to backtrack, figuring I'd missed a turn. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Not a human voice, but something else. It was low, like the rustle of leaves, but with a distinct cadence, almost like words forming just at the edge of hearing. I stopped, heart pounding, listening intently. Silence. Just the wind sighing through the pines. Probably just the wind, I muttered to myself, trying to sound braver than I felt. But even as I said it, a cold prickle of unease settled on my skin. The wind didn't sound like that. I started walking again, faster this time, trying to retrace my steps. And then the whisper came again, closer this time, or so it seemed. It was definitely following me. I couldn't make out any actual words, just that unsettling, sibilant sound, like someone breathing right behind my ear. But there was no one there. It was like the forest itself was sighing, a deep, mournful exhalation that seemed to vibrate in my bones. Panic began to prickle at the edges of my calm. I broke into a jog, then a full run, branches whipping at my face, lungs burning. The whispering intensified, seeming to come from all around me now, a chorus of hushed voices in the trees. It felt like the forest itself was speaking, and whatever it was saying, it wasn't friendly. The whispers started to take on a sharper edge, like nails dragging across bark, and I could almost discern words within the murmurs. Just fragments like lost and alone, and then chillingly clear, closer. I stumbled, fell, and scrambled back up, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to get out. I had to get out of these whispering pines. I pushed through the undergrowth, directionless, just running blindly, desperate to escape the sound. The whispers seemed to burrow into my ears, echoing inside my skull, and a new sensation began. A cold, prickling touch on the back of my neck, like icy fingers tracing my hairline. Then, I saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I stopped, gasping for breath, and peered into the shadows between the trees. Nothing. Just my imagination, I told myself again, but my voice trembled. But this time, the whisper responded, a chillingly soft voice right beside me. No, it's not. I whipped around, heart leaping into my throat, but there was still nothing there. Just the trees, the whispering pines, and the deepening shadows. I started walking again, slower now, more cautiously, scanning the trees. And then, I saw it again. A shape, darker than the shadows, moving behind a thicket of pines. It was tall, gaunt, and seemed to blend into the trees themselves. It was there, then gone. A fleeting glimpse, but enough to send a fresh wave of terror through me. This time, I saw more detail. Impossibly long limbs, like branches themselves, and a head that seemed too small for its body, tilted at an unnatural angle. And then, it was gone, swallowed by the gloom. The whispering intensified, closer than ever now, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it wasn't just the wind. It was coming from it, whatever it was. It was hunting me. And now, the whispers were clearer, forming actual words, though still raspy and indistinct. They were saying my name, over and over, my name whispered on the wind, carried by the trees, echoing through the darkening forest. Jason, Jason, Jason. I ran again, faster than before, fueled by pure, primal fear. I could hear branches snapping behind me, the rustling of undergrowth, and the relentless whispering voices, always just at my heels. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, praying I was running in the right direction, praying I would find my way out. The ground became uneven, roots snagging at my feet, and I could feel myself tiring. my lungs screaming for air. But I couldn't stop. Not while the whispers were still chasing me, calling my name, promising something terrible if they caught me. The cold touch on my neck intensified, feeling less like fingers now and more like icy claws dragging lightly against my skin. Suddenly, the whispering changed again. It became a chorus, a multitude of voices, all whispering at once, overlapping and intertwining, creating a loud, buzzing sound that was almost deafening. And within the chorus, I could now understand phrases, chillingly clear. We see you. We hear you. We want you. The voices seemed to be coming from inside my head now, resonating in my very bones, and the cold touch on my neck became a painful pressure, like something was trying to pull me back, pull me deeper into the woods. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the trees. I stumbled onto a road, blinking in the fading light, the sound of cars a welcome symphony after the forest whispers. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, heart hammering against my ribs. I glanced back at the tree line, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the woods, a tall, dark shape watching me, but then it was gone. I drove away from Cherokee Forest as fast as I could, not daring to look in my rearview mirror. Even now, weeks later, I still hear the whispering in my dreams, and I know with a cold dread that whatever was in those pines, it's still there, waiting for the next lost hiker to wander in, listening for the sound of footsteps to follow, and the whispers to begin again. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can feel that cold touch on my neck and hear my name whispered on the wind, even in my own home. I will never go into the woods alone again, never, and I know with a certainty that chills me to the core that it will be waiting for me if I ever do.
I was geocaching, something I did every weekend to get out of the city and into nature. This Saturday, I chose a new location. Oak Ridge Preserve, a dense woodland a few hours from home. The cache coordinates led me deep into the woods, further than I usually went, but the description promised a unique find, and I was intrigued. The woods were old, the trees thick and gnarled, sunlight barely filtering through the canopy. It was quiet, eerily so, even for a forest. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just a heavy, oppressive silence that pressed in on me. I checked my GPS again, confirming I was on the right track, though the signal was getting weaker. The air grew still, and a strange metallic scent, like old blood, drifted on the non-existent breeze. As I pushed deeper, the trees grew larger, older, and the air grew colder, even though it was a warm day. An unsettling feeling began to creep over me, a sense of being watched, of being unwelcome. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, the solitude getting to me. But the feeling intensified, growing into a prickling unease, like unseen eyes were boring into my back, and the silence seemed to hum with a low, almost inaudible vibration. Then, I saw the tree. It was massive, ancient, its trunk wider than my car, its branches reaching up like twisted arms, and on its bark, carved deep into the wood, was a symbol. A crude, unsettling symbol, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was a circle with 3 lines radiating outwards, each ending in a sharp point, like claws. Beneath it, smaller, almost hidden, were other carvings. Strange, angular shapes that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light. The wood around the carving was strangely discolored, almost blackened, as if the symbol itself was burning into the tree. I felt a chill run down my spine, a primal sense of dread. This wasn't just some random carving. This was intentional and disturbing. I took a picture of it with my phone, a shiver of unease crawling up my neck. As the camera flashed, I could have sworn the symbol pulsed just for a moment, as if reacting to the light. I wanted to get out of there, immediately. but the cache was supposed to be near this tree according to my GPS. Reluctantly, I started searching around the base of the massive oak, pushing aside fallen leaves and moss. And then, I found it. Not a geocache container, but something else entirely. As I knelt down, the metallic scent grew stronger, almost sickeningly sweet, and the silence intensified, pressing against my eardrums. It was a small, wooden box, buried just beneath the surface, hidden under a layer of leaves. It was plain, unadorned, except for a faint carving on the lid, a smaller version of the symbol on the tree. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't a geocache. This was something else. Something ritualistic. The wood of the box felt strangely cold to the touch, even through my gloves, and a faint whispering sound seemed to emanate from within it, too low to understand, but definitely there. Hesitantly, I opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried moss, was a small object wrapped in dark cloth. My hands trembled as I unwrapped it. It was a bone, a human finger bone, bleached white and smooth, with a small hole drilled through the end. And tied to it, with a piece of frayed twine, was another carving, even smaller, almost microscopic, of that same unsettling symbol. As I looked at the bone, a wave of nausea washed over me, and the metallic scent intensified, making my head spin. The symbol seemed to shimmer and writhe in my vision, and a faint, whispering voice echoed in my mind, saying just one word: accept. My stomach lurched. This wasn't a game. This was real. This was dark. I slammed the box shut, dropped it back into the hole, and scrambled back, covering it with leaves as fast as I could. I didn't want to touch it again. I didn't want to be near it. As I backed away, I felt a cold gust of wind, even though there was no breeze, and the trees around me seemed to sway and creak, as if disturbed by my intrusion. I turned and ran, not caring about the geocache anymore, just wanting to escape the oppressive silence of the woods, the chilling carving on the tree, and the horrifying contents of that box. I ran until I was out of the trees, out of the preserve, and back in my car, doors locked, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. Even as I drove away, I could still smell that metallic scent, taste it almost at the back of my throat. And the image of the symbol was burned into my vision, flickering behind my eyelids. I drove away from Oak Ridge Preserve and haven't been back since. I deleted the picture of the carving from my phone, trying to erase the image from my mind, but it's burned into my memory. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up in a cold sweat, seeing that symbol in my dreams and feeling that chilling dread creep over me again. The whispering voice from the box still echoes in my thoughts. That single word, accept. A constant, unsettling suggestion. I know deep down that whatever carved that symbol on the tree, whatever buried that box in the woods, is still out there, watching, waiting, in the silence of the ancient trees. And I pray I never stumble upon its path again. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wonder, what would have happened if I had accepted? And that thought, more than anything, keeps me awake at night, staring into the darkness, listening for sounds that aren't there, and feeling the cold dread of Oak Ridge Preserve settle deep in my bones.
Camping in the Redwood National Park had always been a dream. Towering trees, fresh air, the smell of damp earth and pine needles. It was supposed to be decompressing. My friend Mark and I finally made it happen last weekend. We hiked in a few miles, set up camp near a creek, and spent the afternoon exploring the ancient giants. As dusk settled, the forest transformed. The towering redwoods became even more imposing in the twilight, their silhouettes stark against the darkening sky. The sounds of the day, birds singing, rustling leaves, faded, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. It was peaceful in a way, but also different, heavier. The air itself seemed to thicken, and the shadows under the redwoods stretched and deepened, taking on shapes that weren't quite right. After we ate, as we sat by the fire, the sounds started. Not the normal night sounds of the forest. These were off. At first, it was a low, guttural growl, distant but distinct, coming from somewhere deep in the woods. We both froze, listening. It faded, then returned, closer this time, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated in my chest. It wasn't just a growl, it was a sound of deep, animalistic rage, laced with something else, something colder, something intelligent. Probably just a bear, Mark said, trying to sound casual. But I saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. We made noise, banging pots and pans like we'd been taught, hoping to scare it away. The growling stopped. We breathed a little easier, but the silence that followed was worse, heavier, pregnant with anticipation. Then came the scratching, a rhythmic scraping sound, like claws on bark, starting from a nearby tree. It circled our campsite, moving from tree to tree, always just out of sight in the darkness beyond the firelight. It wasn't like any animal I knew, too deliberate, too purposeful. The scratching was heavy, gouging deep into the redwood bark, and I could hear splinters of wood falling to the forest floor. It wasn't just walking, it was marking its territory. We huddled closer to the fire, the flames our only comfort in the growing darkness. The scratching continued, relentless, and then a new sound joined it, a soft, wet sniffing, like something large was circling us, its nose to the ground, scenting the air. I could feel my skin prickle with fear. This was no bear, this was something else. The sniffing was slow, methodical, and accompanied by a wet, slobbering sound that made my stomach clench. It smelled musky, rank, like decaying meat and wet fur, and the smell was drifting towards us on the night air. Mark grabbed the flashlight, its beam cutting a weak swathe into the darkness. "Let's see what it is," he said, voice tight, and started to step away from the fire. His hand was shaking so badly the flashlight beam danced wildly across the trees. "No!" I hissed, grabbing his arm. "Don't! Just stay by the fire!" I didn't know what was out there, but every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to stay in the light. The darkness beyond the firelight seemed to writhe and pulse, and I had the distinct feeling that if we stepped out of the circle of flames, we would be swallowed whole. He hesitated, then nodded, slowly backing away from the edge of the firelight. We sat there, backs pressed together, listening, hearts pounding in unison. The scratching, sniffing, and growling continued, a terrifying symphony of unseen things circling us in the dark. And then, the sounds began to get closer, the circle tightening. The scratching was now on the trees right at the edge of the firelight. The sniffing was heavy and wet just beyond the flames, and the growling, though still distant, was deeper, more resonant, like something enormous was approaching. Then the sounds changed again. The growling stopped, the scratching faded, and instead we heard whispering. Faint whispers, like the wind through dry leaves. But again, with that unsettling cadence, like words forming just beyond comprehension. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding us, closing in. The whispers were no longer just sounds. They were vibrations, resonating in the air, making the firelight flicker and dance, making the shadows deepen and twist into grotesque shapes. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and then I heard something else within them, a voice, not human, not animal, but something in between, a guttural, rasping voice, speaking just at the edge of hearing. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was malevolent, hungry. The voice seemed to be speaking directly to us, even though we couldn't understand the language, and the intent was terrifyingly clear. It wanted us. Mark whimpered, a small, choked sound. I squeezed his hand, trying to offer some comfort, but I was just as terrified as he was. We were trapped, surrounded by something unseen, unheard, until now, and it was closing in. The fire was beginning to die down, the flames shrinking, and the darkness was pressing in, the whispering voices growing stronger, more insistent, and the smell of decay was almost overwhelming. I could feel something watching us from the edge of the darkness, unseen eyes burning into us. The whispering voices intensified, coalescing into a single, louder voice, and this time, I understood a word. Just one word, whispered right by my ear, so close it felt like breath on my skin, even though there was no one there. The word was mine. And then, a branch snapped just beyond the firelight, a heavy, deliberate snap, like something large stepping closer. That was it. That was all it took. We bolted. We didn't care about the tent, the gear, anything. We just ran, blindly, desperately, back the way we came, crashing through the undergrowth, fueled by pure, unadulterated terror. We ran until we collapsed, gasping for breath, miles from our campsite, and didn't stop running until we were out of the park, out of the redwoods, and back in the car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. Even then, we didn't feel safe. The smell of decay seemed to cling to us, the whispers seemed to echo in our ears, and the image of those unseen eyes burning from the darkness was seared into our minds. We never went back for our gear. Some things are better left lost in the dark, and some sounds once heard in the woods at night can never be unheard. I know, with a cold certainty that haunts my waking hours and invades my dreams, that whatever made those sounds is still out there in the redwoods, waiting for the next unsuspecting campers to stumble into its domain, listening for the crackle of their campfire and the fear in their hearts,